Hey guys, tonight we step back into the sun-drenched, dust-kissed stone corridors of 12th century Jerusalem, where golden sunlight streams through hallowed lancet windows, and the faint scent of cedarwood, dried lavender, and warm desert air drifts through the royal palace. You can hear the distant hum of the bustling holy city outside the limestone walls, donkeys clattering over cobblestones, shopkeepers calling out in a dozen different tongues, and the soft rustle of olive trees swaying in the afternoon breeze. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you are listening from tonight and what time it is over on your side of the world. And while you are down there, leave a comment with what history topic you would like me to cover next. Your suggestion might just become the next video. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine standing on a quiet stone balcony overflowing with potted jasmine, looking out over the terracotta rooftops and soaring bell towers of Jerusalem in the mid-1160s. The Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem was a curious, fragile creation, a narrow strip of Christian territory carved out during the First Crusade less than a century earlier. Nestled along the eastern Mediterranean and surrounded on all sides by vast Islamic emirates, life here carried a constant electric tension. Yet on a peaceful afternoon, the royal palace felt like a tranquil sanctuary of oriental luxury. Smooth marble tiles cooled your feet, rich silk tapestries imported from Damascus draped gracefully along the stone corridors, and the heavy, sweet aroma of frankincense lingered gently in the air. In the central courtyard below, a small boy with bright eyes and fair hair laughed merrily as he chased his playmates around a carved stone fountain. This was Baldwin, born in the early summer of 1161 to Amalric, Count of Jaffa and Ascalon, and his noble wife Agnes of Courtenay. At the time of Baldwin's birth, his father was not yet the king. The crown belonged to Amalric's older brother, King Baldwin III, the charismatic and popular ruler who served as the infant's godfather. During the lavish baptismal ceremony in the Holy City, a sacred oil was applied to the infant's head. The king made a light-hearted joke to the gathered nobles, jokingly declaring that his christening gift to his newborn nephew was the kingdom of Jerusalem itself. It was a witty remark that drew polite laughter from the court, since the 22-year-old monarch was newly married and fully expected to produce plenty of direct heirs of his own. Yet history has a dark sense of irony. Barely 2 years later, King Baldwin III fell ill and died unexpectedly at the age of 33, most likely from dysentery. The rumors of poison whispered quietly through the palace halls, leaving no children behind. Young Baldwin's father was crowned as King Amalric I, and the toddler found himself designated as the official heir to the entire Holy Realm. As the prince grew into a spirited young boy, King Amalric recognized that raising a future monarch in the Crusader states demanded far more than a typical European noble upbringing. The kingdom was perpetually balanced on a razor's edge between diplomacy and warfare, requiring a sovereign who possessed both martial discipline and intellectual brilliance. To ensure his son received an elite education, Amalric recruited William of Tyre, one of the most learned minds of the medieval world. William was a brilliant scholar fluent in Latin, Greek, and Arabic, who would eventually become the kingdom's chancellor and Archbishop of Tyre, as well as its premier chronicler. Picture the peaceful study room where young Baldwin spent his mornings under William's patient tutelage. It was a high-ceilinged chamber tucked deep within the palace walls, shielded from the fierce Levantine heat by thick limestone masonry. Soft sunlight filtered through arched windows, casting rich amber and deep blue patterns across polished wooden tables, piled high with heavy leather-bound manuscripts. The air smelled pleasantly of old parchment, beeswax candles, and the sharp, metallic tang of iron gall ink. Here, William guided the prince through the intricacies of Latin grammar, ancient Roman history, Christian theology, and the complex feudal laws of the kingdom. Baldwin was far from a receptive student. He possessed a sharp, inquisitive mind, a remarkable memory, and a genuine fascination with the lives of ancient military commanders. If medieval report cards had existed, Baldwin's would have been the envy of every noble house in Syria, save perhaps for his habit of asking so many deep questions that his poor tutor lost track of the hour. Yet Baldwin was not merely a bookish child confined to quiet study halls. He possessed a lively, energetic spirit and eagerly joined the other noble boys living at court, the sons of barons, counts, and knights, for daily physical exercises and outdoor games. In the late afternoons, when the scorching heat began to yield to a refreshing evening breeze, the palace courtyard filled with the playful banter of children. They wrestled on soft mats, practiced swordplay with padded wooden blades, and engaged in the rough games typical of young boys preparing for a lifetime of knighthood. It was during one of these playful afternoon skirmishes that a subtle, unsettling anomaly began to unfold. The boys were playing a popular medieval game of endurance, essentially a test of toughness to see who could withstand pain without flinching or crying out. They would gather in a tight circle, grabbing one another's arms and digging their fingernails deep into the skin, or pinching as hard as their young fingers allowed. One by one, the other boys would wince, gasp, or laughingly break away as the sharp stinging became too intense to bear. It was the kind of rivalry where victory brought bragging rights until dinner time, and defeat usually meant a red mark on your forearm. William of Tyre happened to be standing on an upper stone gallery, leaning against the balustrade as he took a short break from his writing. He watched his young pupil interacting with the other children, fully expecting to see Baldwin react like any normal 9-year-old boy. But as William observed more closely, he noticed something strange. An older boy was squeezing Baldwin's right forearm with all his strength, digging his nails in so forcefully that the skin turned pale and indented. Yet Baldwin's facial expression remained completely serene. He did not flinch. He did not pull his arm away. He simply smiled and continued chatting, as though his friend were doing nothing more than resting a feather against his sleeve. Intrigued and growing mildly concerned, the tutor descended the stone stairs into the courtyard and gently called Baldwin over to a quiet corner. William took the boy's right hand in his own, carefully examining the skin. To the naked eye, Baldwin's hand appeared entirely healthy. There were no visible sores, no discoloration, and no signs of injury. William gently pinched the back of the boy's hand, then squeezed much harder. Baldwin looked up with clear, innocent eyes and shook his head, explaining casually that he felt no pain whatsoever. William brought the child into his private study, retrieved a small metal pin, and lightly pricked various points along Baldwin's right arm, from the elbow down to the tips of his fingers. Each time, Baldwin confirmed that he could feel the physical pressure of his tutor's touch, but absolutely no sensation of pain, heat, or cold. A cold chill settled over William of Tyre's heart. In the 12th century, the complete loss of pain sensation in a limb was the unmistakable early sign of a terrifying diagnosis: leprosy. To contract leprosy in the Middle Ages was to receive a living death sentence, carrying not only physical destruction, but an overwhelming social and religious stigma. Lepers were routinely cast out of society, declared legally dead, and forced to live in isolated colonies. For the sole male heir of the Kingdom of Jerusalem to suffer from such an affliction was a political catastrophe beyond comprehension. Historians still argue whether the royal physicians immediately recognized the tragic truth in those early months, or whether they desperately persuaded themselves that the numbness was merely a temporary nerve injury resulting from a fall during riding practice. Driven by desperate hope, King Amalric and the royal court chose to keep the discovery strictly confidential. They brought in the most renowned physicians from across the Levant, including skilled Christian doctors and celebrated Arab medical practitioners whose knowledge of healing far exceeded that of Western Europe. In the privacy of the royal chambers, these doctors subjected the prince to an array of medieval treatments. They applied warm herbal poultices made of rare oils, soaked his arm in thermal mineral baths, and prescribed complex herbal tonics designed to balance his bodily humors. Baldwin endured these lengthy procedures with remarkable patience, but the numbness remained unyielding, a silent shadow creeping slowly beneath the surface of his youth. Despite the dark cloud hanging over his future, Baldwin showed a quiet resilience that astonished everyone around him. Knowing that his right hand was slowly losing its strength, he refused to let the disability limit his physical capabilities. He began training with native Arab riding masters employed by the royal stables, learning an advanced technique of horsemanship that relied almost entirely on lower body balance. Hour after hour, under the blazing Levantine sun, Baldwin practiced controlling his warhorse, using only the pressure of his knees, calves, and thighs against the saddle. He learned to guide a galloping charger through sharp turns and sudden stops without using his reins, keeping his hands free to hold a shield or weapon. Watching the young prince ride across the dusty plains outside Jerusalem, his golden hair catching the light as his horse moved in perfect harmony with his commands, one could easily forget the tragic destiny awaiting him. Baldwin possessed the grace of a born prince, the mind of a scholar, and the heart of a warrior. Yet beneath his calm exterior, the young boy was beginning to realize that his life would not be measured in decades of quiet rule, but in a relentless race against time and his own decaying body. As twilight fell over the holy city, casting long purple shadows across the limestone hills, Baldwin walked back into the palace corridors, ready to face whatever burdens the crown would soon place upon his young shoulders. As you step out of William's quiet study and navigate the cool, echoing corridors of the royal palace, the atmosphere changes subtly. Boyhood games recede into the background, replaced by the hushed whispers of men and women who measure every word with calculated precision. The court of Jerusalem is a place where a single raised eyebrow across a banquet table can alter the flow of royal favor, and where political survival depends on reading the room before stepping into it. You walk past arched alcoves framed by carved sandstone, where shadows stretch long and thin across the polished floorboards. You can hear the low, rhythmic murmur of barons, bishops' aides, and foreign envoys huddled in small circles, their eyes flicking toward you for a fraction of a second before returning to their quiet conversations. You are no longer just an energetic child running through the gardens. You are a living equation in the kingdom's delicate political balance. Living in this court means coming to terms with the peculiar web of family dynamics that defined your childhood. Your father, King Amalric, was a stern, pragmatic man who understood the ruthless realities of governance. When he claimed the throne back in 1163, the High Court of Jerusalem delivered a stinging ultimatum. He could wear the crown, but only if he set aside your mother, Agnes of Courtenay. The barons feared her family's growing influence, using the legal technicality of third cousin consanguinity to force a marital annulment. Amalric agreed to the condition, securing the crown while ensuring that both you and your elder sister Sibylla were legally recognized as legitimate heirs. Your mother was sent away from the immediate royal household, living on her own estates while maintaining a quiet, watchful presence on the margins of power. It created an odd, fragmented upbringing, where maternal affection was filtered through official visits and political messengers, leaving you to grow up amidst a sea of advisors whose loyalty was always subject to renegotiation. The nobles who populate these echoing halls are not inherently cruel, but they are deeply pragmatic. In the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, the feudal legal code laid down strict rules regarding the obligations of a monarch. A king was expected to be a military commander above all else, a leader who could don heavy iron mail, mount a warhorse, and lead his vassals into battle against surrounding enemies. A sovereign who could not hold a sword or ride into combat posed an existential problem for a state surrounded by hostile powers. As you walk through the great reception halls, smelling the fragrant smoke of burning olive wood drifting from massive stone hearths, you can sense the underlying anxiety gripping the nobility. They nod respectfully as you pass, bowing low with practiced elegance, but behind their polite smiles lies a cold, calculating worry about what the future holds for a realm ruled by a fragile prince. Historians continue to debate the extent to which court factions had already begun lining up behind potential successors during these quiet pre-adolescent years. Some scholars suggest that key noble families were already secretly negotiating behind your father's back, anticipating a brief reign and preparing for an inevitable regency struggle. Others argue that the court remained fiercely loyal to King Amalric, clinging to the desperate hope that your condition was merely an unusual childhood ailment that might stabilize as you matured into adulthood. Regardless of which theory holds true, the air in the palace grew heavier with every passing month. Every time you stumbled slightly on a stone staircase or dropped an eating utensil during a formal dinner, dozens of sharp eyes noted the slip, registering it as another tally mark against the kingdom's long-term stability. Rather than allowing yourself to be crushed by the weight of these silent evaluations, you retreat to the one place in the royal compound where political maneuvering gives way to absolute honesty: the royal stables. Here, beneath heavy timber beams that smell pleasantly of sweet hay, leather oil, and fresh cedar bedding, there are no courtiers offering hollow flattery or medicinal teas that promise miracles. The grooms move quietly among the stalls, tending to some of the finest war horses in the Mediterranean basin. These are not nimble desert ponies. They are massive destriers, heavy, powerful beasts bred specifically to carry armored knights into the chaos of battle. They stomp their hooves against the stone floor, their breath rising in soft white plumes against the cool morning air. It is here that your physical transformation begins in earnest, with the sensation in your right hand slowly fading. Traditional knightly training becomes an exercise in creative adaptation. Standard medieval riding techniques relied heavily on a firm two-handed grip on the leather reins to guide the horse through intricate battlefield maneuvers. To overcome this limitation, your trainers introduce you to the unique mechanics of the medieval war saddle. Unlike modern riding saddles, a Crusader destrier was fitted with a deep, heavy wooden frame featuring an exceptionally high pommel in the front and a sweeping cantle in the back. This saddle was essentially a piece of wooden armor designed to lock a rider securely into place, surrounding the hips and upper thighs like a rigid vice. An unusual and lesser-known aspect of medieval horsemanship is just how much control could be exerted without using your hands at all. Guided by native Syrian horsemasters whose families had bred steeds for generations, you begin the arduous task of retraining your entire muscle memory. You learn to lean slightly into the curve of the high saddle pommel, using subtle shifts in your core weight to signal turns. A firm squeeze of your left calf against the horse's flank tells the beast to sidestep. A gentle shift of your hips backward signals an immediate stop. Hour after hour, you ride through the enclosed practice ring, the rhythmic thud of hooves providing a soothing, repetitive soundtrack to your physical effort. Your left hand becomes exceptionally strong and precise, capable of managing the leather reins single-handedly, while your right arm rests comfortably at your side, freed from the burden of forced control. There is a quiet, meditative beauty to these long practice sessions. As the morning sun warms the red clay of the riding arena, you feel a deep sense of connection with the powerful animal beneath you. The horse does not care about court rumors, nor does it judge you for the numbness creeping through your fingers. It simply responds to the clarity of your intent and the steady pressure of your legs. You realize that while your body may be failing in subtle ways, Your mind and resolve remain entirely intact. You are learning to master a creature 5 times your size through pure discipline and technique, proving to yourself that physical limitation does not mean helplessness. By the time you dismount and hand the reins back to the stable master, your clothes are dusted with dry clay and your muscles ache with a satisfying, healthy fatigue. You wipe the sweat from your brow, feeling a calm confidence that no court gossip can shake. Walking back toward the main palace chambers as the evening sky turns a deep indigo, you pass the same courtiers who were whispering in the shadows hours earlier. This time, as you look them squarely in the eye, there is a quiet intensity in your gaze that makes them hesitate. You know that the road ahead will be fraught with unimaginable challenges, but you have found your balance, both in the saddle and within the cold halls of power. The summer of 1174 rolled into Jerusalem like a suffocating wave of dry, relentless heat, carrying scorching desert winds that rattled the cedar shutters of the royal palace. Inside the cool stone halls, the quiet rhythms of childhood vanished almost overnight, replaced by an urgent, heavy tension. Dispatches arrived from the northern frontier with grim news. Your father, King Amalric I, was returning from a grueling military campaign in Syria, severely stricken with dysentery. Within days, the formidable monarch, who had long stood as the unyielding pillar of the entire kingdom, was completely incapacitated by violent fevers and debilitating illness. You walked through the vaulted stone corridors, surrounded by the sharp scent of bitter medicinal concoctions, burning frankincense, and the hushed, anxious whispers of court physicians moving hurriedly between the royal apartments. On July 11th, 1174, at just 13 years old, you stood in the dim light of your father's bedchamber, watching the life fade from his eyes as the kingdom was suddenly thrust into an unexpected crisis. The shock of your father's passing left no time for private grief, for the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem could not afford a power vacuum for even a single day. Nestled in a fragile landscape surrounded by rival states, the realm required immediate and visible continuity. Feudal law mandated that a monarch under the age of 15 could not exercise direct personal authority without an appointed regent. But before the question of regency could be settled, your own royal legitimacy had to be proclaimed to the world. 4 days after your father's death, on July 15, 1174, the noble barons, bishops, and military orders gathered to crown you as the new sovereign inside the sacred walls of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The timing of your coronation carried an immense historical weight that was lost on no one present. July 15th was the exact 75th anniversary of the day the Knights of the First Crusade captured Jerusalem in 1099, establishing the Christian kingdom. Picture the awe-inspiring atmosphere inside the ancient basilica on that warm summer morning. Beams of golden sunlight cut through the rising clouds of incense, illuminating the brilliant gold mosaics glittering across the high stone arches, while the deep, resonant chants of the clergy echoed off the massive limestone pillars. You knelt before the high altar, feeling the chill of the polished floor beneath your knees. The Patriarch of Jerusalem anointed your forehead with holy oil, then carefully placed the heavy gold crown, studded with precious gems, upon your young head. Rich brocade robes were draped over your shoulders, strategically tailored to conceal your numbing right arm, and the discreet linen bandages wrapped beneath your sleeves. As the shouts of acclamation from the gathered nobility filled the sacred hall, the weight of the crown settled onto your brow, signaling the formal end of your youth. No sooner had the sacred oil dried than a fierce political struggle erupted within the palace walls over who would control the regency. Initially, Miles of Plancy, the kingdom's arrogant seneschal and a close favorite of the late king, moved quickly to assume informal control over the administration. He made executive decisions without consulting the high court, deeply alienating the native barons, who viewed him as an overbearing upstart. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail reveals how swiftly medieval politics could turn lethal. Barely a few months into his informal rule, while walking through the moonlit, bustling streets of the coastal port city of Acre, Miles of Plancy was ambushed in the dark and stabbed to death by unknown assailants. To this day, the true orchestrators behind his midnight assassination remain buried in historical shadow. Following the violent removal of Miles, the High Court assembled to formally appoint a legitimate regent, selecting Raymond III, Count of Tripoli, to serve as bailey until you reached your 15th birthday. Raymond was one of the most prominent and experienced figures in the Latin East. A first cousin of your late father, he was a seasoned military commander who had spent nearly 10 grueling years as a prisoner of war in the dark dungeons of Aleppo before his enormous ransom was finally paid. That decade spent in Muslim captivity had given Raymond a deep, pragmatic understanding of Islamic culture, politics, and military strategy, transforming him into a cautious diplomat who favored strategic truces over reckless battlefield glory. Historians continue to debate the true nature of Raymond of Tripoli's ambitions during these critical years of your youth. Some scholars portray Raymond as a selfless, noble statesman who used his diplomatic skill to negotiate essential peace treaties, giving the kingdom precious time to stabilize its defenses and economic resources. Other historians argue that Raymond was a calculating opportunist, quietly maneuvering behind the scenes to secure his own political dominance and position himself as the logical successor should the young, ailing king succumb to his illness without producing an heir. Under Raymond's experienced guidance, you spent your early teenage years undergoing an intensive, real-world education in the art of governance. Imagine sitting atop the carved wooden throne in the central council chamber, where tall lancet windows looked out toward the Mount of Olives. Clad in dark silk garments designed to cover your body, you sat quietly for hours, observing the fiery debates between the great barons of the realm and the grand masters of the Knights Templar and Knights Hospitaller. To be completely honest, sitting through 4 consecutive hours of adult noblemen screaming at each other over sheep grazing fees along the Jordan River and import tariffs on Syrian spice caravans at 13 years old felt like a mental endurance test, far more agonizing than any Latin grammar quiz Master William had ever devised. Yet you forced yourself to remain perfectly still, keeping your expression unreadable as you absorbed every subtlety of court diplomacy. While the court at Jerusalem squabbled over domestic policies, a formidable external threat was rapidly taking shape beyond your borders. Saladin, having established absolute control over Egypt, seized the opportunity presented by the death of the Syrian ruler Nur-ad-Din in 1174 to march north and take control of Damascus. For the first time in the kingdom's history, Egypt and Syria were united under the leadership of a single, brilliant commander. The strategic chessboard had fundamentally shifted. Your small, narrow kingdom was now encircled by a unified Ayyubid empire, capable of launching coordinated attacks from both the south and the north. Rather than giving in to dread, you used these quiet years of regency to prepare yourself for the monumental task ahead. He spent countless hours studying detailed parchment maps of the Levant, memorizing the topography of every mountain pass, river ford, and border garrison from Antioch to Ascalon. You paid close attention to the personalities of the men who surrounded you, learning to distinguish between hollow flatterers, hot-headed zealots, and genuinely dependable commanders. Though the numbness in your right arm continued its slow progression, your mental acuity grew sharper with every passing month. You recognized that physical strength alone would not save your kingdom. Survival would depend on strategic vision, iron discipline, and an unflinching will. As twilight settled over the holy city, painting the limestone battlements in soft hues of lavender and gold, you stood on the high balcony of the royal palace. The cool evening breeze carried the gentle ringing of church bells from the sepulchre. mingling with the distant rhythmic call to prayer, echoing from the eastern quarter. You looked out over the quiet rooftops of Jerusalem, feeling the smooth gold band of the crown against your forehead. You knew that the 2 years of Raymond's regency were drawing to a close, and that your 15th birthday was fast approaching. Soon, the protective shield of a regent would be set aside, and you would step forward to take sole, unassisted command of a kingdom standing in the shadow of empire. July of 1176 arrives with the characteristic stifling heat of a Mediterranean summer, sending waves of shimmering air across the limestone parapets of Jerusalem. You stand on the high palace balcony, feeling the warm wind gently rustle your linen tunic, while looking out over the crowded rooftops of the Holy City. Today is not merely another hot summer afternoon in the Levant. It is the month you turn 15. Under the established feudal customs of the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, 15 marks the formal threshold of legal adulthood, the exact moment a young prince casts off the authority of royal regents and steps into full, unassisted sovereignty. Raymond III of Tripoli's regency comes to an official close without dramatic public speeches or political violence, but with a quiet, watchful tension that lingers in every corner of the court. You walk into the great council hall, watching the gathered barons bow low as you approach the elevated dais. There is no regent standing beside you to approve your decrees or speak on your behalf. From this moment forward, every administrative decision, every military summons, and every diplomatic letter bears your personal authority alone. Assuming direct personal rule requires an immediate restructuring of your inner council to ensure that executive power remains firmly in your hands rather than drifting back toward rival noble factions. To accomplish this, you oversee a major political appointment that reshapes the court's balance of power. You welcome your maternal uncle, Jocelyn III of Edessa, back into the royal fold, appointing him as the Seneschal of Jerusalem, the high official responsible for managing royal estates, overseeing military logistics, and administering court affairs. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail highlights the sheer ordeal Jocelyn endured prior to his return. He had spent 14 agonizing years as a prisoner of war in the dark subterranean dungeons of Aleppo, following his capture in 1164. His freedom was only secured when your mother, Agnes of Courtenay, helped assemble a staggering ransom of 50,000 gold dinars, a sum so massive it nearly drained several regional treasuries. Bringing Jocelyn into the royal administration gives you a fiercely loyal ally who owes his freedom and position directly to your family, creating a crucial counterweight to the influential faction led by Raymond of Tripoli. Historians continue to debate the true political dynamics behind the sudden elevation of your mother's family in 1176. Some scholars view you as a remarkably shrewd young monarch who intentionally engineered the rise of the Courtenay clan to build an independent power base, deliberately insulating yourself from the overbearing influence of the native barons. Other researchers suggest a more vulnerable scenario, arguing that at 15 years old, faced with the frightening progression of your illness, you may have been quietly guided by your mother Agnes and uncle Jocelyn, who used your royal authority to secure wealth, titles, and political dominance for their own family lineage. Whether you were the primary architect of this political shift or merely a willing participant in your family's ambitious strategy, the result was unmistakable. The court of Jerusalem now revolved around a new center of gravity. To put things into perspective, imagine comparing your 15-year-old self to a teenager in the modern world. While a typical 15-year-old today is probably stressing over high school chemistry exams, debating video game strategies with friends, or trying to figure out how to ask someone to the school dance, your daily calendar looks vastly different. Your morning agenda involves auditing complex tax ledgers written on parchment, settling heated land disputes between hot-tempered barons, and reviewing intelligence reports regarding troop movements along the Syrian frontier. To make matters even more surreal, You are managing this crushing workload while coping with a body that is quietly betraying you, as numbness creeps further up your arm. It is enough to make anyone miss the days when Master William's Latin grammar quizzes felt like the biggest crisis of the week. Rather than remaining comfortably behind the heavy stone walls of the capital, you decide that the most effective way to establish your authority as king is to lead an army directly into the field. You understand that in the feudal crusader states, a monarch's legitimacy is intimately tied to his ability to act as a battlefield commander. In the late summer of 1176, you authorize a bold offensive into the Bekaa Valley, a fertile, strategically vital depression lying between the Lebanon and anti-Lebanon mountain ranges, then controlled by the Muslim rulers of Damascus. This is not merely a routine border patrol. It is a direct statement to both your own subjects and your surrounding neighbors that the young king of Jerusalem is fully prepared to take the fight to the enemy. Picture the scene. As the royal host marches north out of Jerusalem, the morning air is thick with the scent of crushed wild thyme, dry pine needles, and the dusty earth kicked up by thousands of iron-shod hooves. The metallic clatter of chainmail coats, rubbing against leather scabbards, creates a steady, rhythmic hum that echoes through the narrow mountain passes. You ride near the front of the column, alongside the veteran constable, Humphrey II of Tehran, a gray-bearded warrior who has fought in dozens of campaigns across the Levant. You sit upright in your high wooden saddle, using the steady grip of your thighs to keep your balance as your horse navigates the rocky terrain. The sun beats down mercilessly, heating your iron helmet until it feels warm to the touch, yet you refuse to show discomfort. Behind you, the banners of the kingdom flutter gently in the warm breeze, their bright red crosses standing out starkly against the deep blue sky. The raid into the Bekaa Valley proves to be a resounding tactical success. Your forces sweep through the rich agricultural lands, seizing valuable livestock, grain supplies, and booty, while dispersing local defensive forces commanded by Saladin's nephew, Farrukh Shah. For the knights and foot soldiers riding behind you, seeing their 15-year-old king leading from the front, handling his mount with effortless skill, despite his visible physical limitation, instills a profound sense of respect and pride. You demonstrate that physical illness does not equate to weakness of spirit, proving that you possess the tactical awareness and personal bravery required to command men in dangerous territory. This military expedition also represents a clear shift in foreign policy. During Raymond of Tripoli's regency, the kingdom had relied heavily on temporary truces with Saladin to maintain a precarious peace. But upon assuming personal rule, you choose a far more assertive stance, refusing to renew non-aggression agreements that might allow Saladin time to consolidate his hold over Syria. You recognize that Saladin's long-term goal is the total encirclement of Jerusalem, and you are determined to disrupt his regional momentum whenever the opportunity arises. By launching an offensive into the Bekaa Valley, you signal to Damascus and Cairo that the Latin kingdom will not wait passively to be attacked. As the campaign concludes, and your victorious army begins the long march back toward Jerusalem, a sense of quiet satisfaction settles over you. You ride through the stone gates of the holy city as twilight paints the sky in shades of deep plum and burnished gold. Townspeople line the narrow cobblestone streets, cheering and tossing olive branches beneath your horse's hooves, while church bells peal joyfully across the rooftops. You dismount in the palace courtyard, feeling a deep, satisfying ache in your legs from days spent in the saddle. The young prince who inherited a kingdom in shadow has proven that he can wear the crown with authority and lead his men with honor. Late that evening, you sit alone in your private chambers, looking out through an arched lancet window at the quiet city below. The cool night air carries the soothing scents of night-blooming jasmine, lavender, and damp stone from the palace gardens. Look down at your right hand, resting motionless on the wooden armrest of your chair. The physical path ahead will undoubtedly be filled with increasing pain and physical decay, But tonight, you know that your spirit remains unyielding. You have claimed your birthright, earned the respect of your people, and established yourself as a true sovereign. Whenever trials, Saladin, and destiny may send your way, you are ready to face them as the undisputed King of Jerusalem. The brief euphoria following your return from the Bekaa Valley gradually settles into the quiet, vigilant routine of late autumn across the Latin kingdom. Victory celebrations in medieval courts are notoriously short-lived affairs, quickly swallowed by the relentless realities of border defense. You stand atop the northern ramparts of the citadel in Jerusalem, as a chilly evening wind sweeps in from the Judean hills, rustling the heavy woolen cloak wrapped around your shoulders. In the dimming light, the surrounding landscape appears vast and deceptively peaceful, its rolling hills painted in muted shades of ochre, slate, and olive green. Yet beyond those quiet horizons lies an extraordinary strategic challenge, a massive, tightening ring forged by one of the most capable leaders in Islamic history. Across the borders in Egypt and Syria, Saladin is orchestrating a masterclass in regional consolidation. Having secured Cairo and Damascus, he turns his attention toward bringing independent Muslim emirs into his fold, systematically absorbing key cities like Homs and Hama, while placing immense pressure on Aleppo. A well-established historical fact of this era is that Saladin's primary ambition during these middle years of the 1170s was not immediately to destroy the Latin kingdom, but rather to construct a unified Ayyubid state capable of surrounding it entirely. For the first time since the First Crusade, the Frankish settlers find themselves caught between two wings of a single, highly coordinated empire, effectively ending the decades when Crusader leaders could easily play rival Muslim governors against one another. To stay ahead of this emerging threat, you transform your daily routine into a masterclass in frontier intelligence. Since you cannot be everywhere at once, you rely on a sophisticated network of desert outposts, Bedouin informants, and garrison commanders stationed at key castles along the Jordan River and down toward the Sinai Desert. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail of border warfare in the 12th century Levant was the extensive reliance on homing pigeons and optical smoke signals by both Frankish and Muslim intelligence networks. A message tied to a pigeon's leg could travel from the frontier post at Ultrajourdain to the royal palace in Jerusalem in a matter of hours, delivering vital reports on troop movements, forage supplies, and supply train directions far faster than any courier riding a horse across the rugged terrain. Receiving these dispatches in the quiet hours of the evening feels like managing a high-stakes, impossibly complex grand strategy game, except there is no reset button, and every misplaced garrison means a real village is destroyed. You sit at a heavy oak table in your private cabinet, surrounded by maps inked on soft vellum that smell of old animal hide and cedar oil. A single iron oil lamp casts a warm, flickering glow across the room, creating long shadows that dance against the rough stone walls. With your left hand, you carefully trace the trade routes, running from Damascus down to Cairo, calculating how many days it would take a fast-moving Ayyubid vanguard to cross the Sinai Peninsula or strike at the southern fortress of Ascalon. Historians still argue whether Saladin's frequent border probing during late 1176 and early 1177 was intended as the opening phase of a full-scale invasion of Jerusalem, or if it was merely a series of tactical distraction raids designed to keep you on the defensive while he finished securing his political power base in northern Syria. Some scholars contend that Saladin underestimated your resolve, viewing the young king as a temporary inconvenience, whose failing health would soon plunge the kingdom into internal chaos. Others argue that Saladin was exceptionally cautious, recognizing that even a smaller Frankish army, commanded by a determined king, could inflict serious damage if allowed to strike at his supply lines. Determined not to be caught unprepared, you embark on a series of inspection tours along the kingdom's eastern and southern marches. These journeys are physically demanding, testing your stamina to its absolute limits. Riding for long days under the harsh Levantine sun, exposed to dry desert dust and sharp night chills, requires an almost unbelievable amount of willpower. You ride at the head of your small royal escort, wrapped in a simple traveling cloak to shield your sensitive skin from the wind. The aroma of wild sage, roasted coffee beans from Bedouin campfires, and damp earth fills the cool morning air as your horse picks its way along the narrow limestone trails, overlooking the Jordan Valley. Visiting the frontier garrisons gives you a first-hand look at the men who guard your realm. You inspect the stone masonry of watchtowers, check the water levels in deep underground cisterns, and personally review the grain stores held within massive castle vaults. The soldiers who man these remote outposts, hardened mercenaries, local native Christians, and veteran knights, watch you closely as you inspect their lines. They see a young king who refuses the luxury of the palace, who sits in the saddle for 10 hours a day, despite his visible infirmities, and who speaks to them with clear, direct authority. Your presence sends a quiet, powerful message through the ranks. The realm is guarded by a monarch who shares their burdens and understands their dangers. During these border tours, you also contend with the delicate internal diplomacy required to keep your barons aligned. Medieval feudalism was a notoriously fragmented system, where powerful lords often viewed their personal estates as semi-independent kingdoms. Lords like Reynald of Châtillon, who held the vast, rugged territory of Outre-Jourdain, east of the Dead Sea, were prone to taking aggressive, unauthorized actions against Muslim merchant caravans. Balancing the hot-headed instincts of such barons against the cautious diplomacy favored by veterans like Raymond of Tripoli requires exceptional tact. You must appear firm enough to command their obedience, yet flexible enough to keep their military retinues available when the kingdom calls for a full feudal summons. By early 1177, the geopolitical atmosphere grows increasingly tense. News arrives that a large crusader fleet, led by Philip of Alsace, the Count of Flanders, is preparing to land at the port of Acre. On paper, the arrival of hundreds of fresh European knights and infantry represents a massive boost to your kingdom's military strength. Yet, as you sit in council preparing for their arrival, you know that European crusaders often bring their own political agendas, rarely understanding the delicate strategic balance required to survive in the Levant. They arrive dreaming of glorious conquests, oblivious to the fact that a single miscalculated battle could leave the entire kingdom of Jerusalem completely defenseless. As night falls over your encampment near the Sea of Galilee, the camp quietens into a peaceful hush. The soft clinking of iron cooking pots, the low murmur of soldiers telling stories around dying embers, and the gentle rustle of horses feeding on dry grass create a soothing evening tapestry. You lie back on a simple cot inside your linen pavilion, listening to the night breeze whisper through the tent ropes. Your right arm aches with a deep, dull throbbing, a constant reminder of the physical decay advancing beneath your bandages. Yet your mind is filled with a calm, focused clarity. You have mapped the borders, tested your garrisons, and measured your enemy. You know that the quiet months of border skirmishes are drawing to a close, and that a far greater test of iron and fire is rapidly approaching on the horizon. Late autumn rains sweep across the Judean highlands, turning dry country roads into rivers of thick, dark mud that smell of damp limestone and decaying oak leaves. From the high battlements of the citadel in Jerusalem, you watch gray rain clouds roll down the valleys, heavy and suffocating against the horizon. The quiet evening routine of the court shatters when a drenched, mud-splattered messenger bursts through the heavy iron gates, his horse shivering from total exhaustion. He brings alarming dispatches from the north. The main field army of the kingdom, under the joint command of Count Raymond of Tripoli and Count Philip of Flanders, has marched deep into northern Syria to lay siege to the fortress of Harim. In their zeal for northern conquest, they have drawn away the most experienced knights and heavy cavalry in the realm. The southern frontier of the Latin kingdom lies completely exposed, guarded only by skeleton garrisons and thin watchtowers. Across the desert in Egypt, Saladin sees this strategic blunder with crystal clarity. A well-established historical fact of the Crusader period is that in mid-November 1177, Saladin launched a massive, full-scale invasion force from Cairo, numbering between 20,000 and 26,000 seasoned troops. His army included his personal elite guard of 1,000 Mamluks, clad in gleaming yellow silk over coats of iron mail. Crossing the arid Sinai Desert without facing a single organized obstacle, Saladin's vanguard swept past the Templar fortress at Gaza and pressed directly into the fertile coastal plains toward Ramla and Leda. His ultimate objective was simple and uncompromising: to march straight up the Judean hills and capture the holy city of Jerusalem itself. Faced with an invading host 50 times larger than any garrison left in the capital, most 16-year-old rulers would have ordered the heavy oak city gates barred, retreated behind the stone battlements, and prayed fervently for the northern army to make a miraculous return. To be fair, sitting comfortably inside a thick stone fortress, eating warm barley soup while an enemy army marches past, sounds like a very sensible afternoon plan. But you understand the brutal math of medieval warfare. If you allow Saladin to roam unchecked, the rich agricultural heartlands of the kingdom will be burned to ash, the rural populations slaughtered or enslaved, and Jerusalem surrounded and starved into submission before any northern relief force can arrive. Refusing to hide behind stone walls, you issue an immediate, desperate summons for the full feudal levy of the kingdom. Every available vassal, local landholder, and town militia member is called to arms. Yet when the muster is complete, the total force gathered beneath the royal standard is shockingly small, a meager 375 to 500 knights, accompanied by a few thousand lightly armed infantry and local volunteers. Joining your small host are roughly 80 Knights Templar, under the stern command of their Grand Master, Odo de Saint-Amand. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail of this emergency march was the decision to bring forth the true cross, the most sacred relic in the kingdom, believed to be a fragment of the original wooden cross set in a frame of gold and silver. It was removed from its dark chapel in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and entrusted to Bishop Albert of Bethlehem, who rode near the front of the army, holding the golden reliquary aloft. Seeing the glinting relic amidst the falling rain gave the outnumbered soldiers an electric, almost surreal surge of spiritual determination. Despite suffering from a severe feverish chill racking your body, and despite the advancing numbness in your right arm, you mount your warhorse and lead the column out through the southern gates. You sit firm in the saddle, controlling your mount through subtle knee pressure, your left hand holding the leather reins firmly against the horse's neck. The march south is a grueling ordeal. Cold rain beats mercilessly against your steel helm, and the sharp scent of wet leather, iron mail, and churning mud fills the damp air. Every rhythmic jolt of the horse sends a dull, aching throb through your joints, yet you maintain an erect, uncompromising posture at the head of the column. You ride toward the coastal fortress of Ascalon, a strategic stronghold that offers the only chance of blocking Saladin's direct route up toward Jerusalem. Your small army reaches Ascalon just in time, slipping inside the heavy stone gates mere hours before Saladin's massive vanguard appears on the horizon. Seeing you and your tiny force retreat inside the walls of Ascalon, Saladin makes a pivotal decision that will shape the entire campaign. Assuming that the young king and his handful of knights are safely trapped inside the fortress, neutralized, and incapable of posing any serious military threat, Saladin decides not to waste time on a formal siege. He leaves a small detachment to monitor Ascalon, and orders his main army to push directly toward Ramla and Jerusalem. Confident in his overwhelming numbers, Saladin makes the fatal mistake of allowing his troops to disperse across the countryside, to plunder villages, gather forage, and burn local farms. Historians still argue whether the daring plan to break out of Ascalon and strike Saladin's scattered rear was an original strategic masterpiece conceived entirely by you, or if the initial tactical idea was proposed by the native lords of the realm, particularly the Ibelin brothers, Baldwin and Balian, whose ancestral lands around Ramla were currently being reduced to cinders. Some scholars argue that a 16-year-old king suffering from physical exhaustion would naturally rely on the seasoned advice of his local barons. Other historians emphasize that as the reigning monarch, the ultimate moral burden and operational risk of ordering a breakout belonged to you alone. Had the breakout failed, the entire kingdom of Jerusalem would have fallen in a single afternoon. Looking out from the high watchtowers of Ascalon, you watch thick columns of black smoke rising into the overcast autumn sky along the northern horizon. You instantly spot Saladin's critical error. In his supreme confidence, he has shattered his own army's cohesion, spreading his forces thin across miles of open country while keeping no organized reserve. His arrogance has handed you the one tactical opening you needed. Turning to your gathered commanders inside the damp stone guardroom, your voice is steady and quiet. You order the army to assemble silently at the northern gates in the dead of night. As midnight approaches inside the citadel, the rain tapers off into a fine, misting drizzle. In the quiet solitude of your private quarters, royal attendants carefully rewrap the linen bandages around your arms and legs, applying soothing ointments to your raw skin before lacing you back into your iron armor. The quiet rustle of linen, the sharp scent of clove oil, and the muffled sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below create a strange, peaceful calm before the coming storm. You know that at first light, on the open plains near Montgisard, you will throw your tiny force directly into the heart of Saladin's empire. You close your eyes for a brief moment, listening to the soft wind whistle through the stone embrasures, entirely focused on the dawn to come. Dawn breaks over the undulating plains near Montgisard on November 25th, 1177. The morning sun cuts through the fading coastal drizzle, painting the low limestone ridges in soft shades of amber and rose. A cool, crisp breeze sweeps across the scrubland, carrying the pungent scent of wet earth, wild sage, and dry thistles. You ride near the crest of a gentle hill, the leather reins resting lightly in your left hand while your right arm hangs motionless, securely wrapped inside your padded gambeson beneath your steel mail. Beside you, the golden reliquary containing the true cross catches the morning light, throwing brilliant, shimmering reflections across the damp sand. Below in the valley lies the sprawling, chaotic encampment of Saladin's army, completely unaware that the small force from Ascalon has tracked them down. The scene unfolding in the valley below is a textbook masterclass in military disarray. Expecting no serious opposition on their march toward Jerusalem, the Ayyubid forces have allowed their tactical cohesion to dissolve completely. Pack mules, looted cattle, and heavy baggage wagons are jammed together in tight bottlenecks along the muddy trail. Soldiers are scattered across the fields in small, unorganized groups, some tending cooking fires, others sorting through plunder, and many caught completely out of armor. A well-established historical fact of the Battle of Montgisard is that Saladin's army was caught so entirely off guard that his elite troops did not even have time to form a proper defensive line before the Frankish cavalry appeared on the heights above them. Observing the disarray from the hilltop, a heavy, expectant quiet settles over your small army. Beside you sit the veteran lords of Outremer, Baldwin and Balian of Ibelin, the stern Grandmaster Odo de Saint-Amand, and the aging Constable Humphrey of Touran. Their warhorses snort softly in the chilly morning air, white plumes of steam rising from their nostrils as iron shoes paw nervously at the damp soil. The total strength of your force stands at fewer than 500 heavy knights and roughly a few thousand foot soldiers, confronting an enemy host that still vastly outnumbers you despite its disorganization. You know that a standard cavalry charge against a prepared formation would be suicidal, but against a surprised and scattered foe, speed and terror are everything. Before issuing the command to strike, you perform an act that would be etched into Crusader memory for generations. You signal your attendants to help you dismount from your heavy warhorse. Slipping down to the damp earth, your legs stiff and aching from the long night ride, you walk slowly toward the true cross held high by Bishop Albert of Bethlehem. Beneath the vast open sky, in full view of every knight and foot soldier, you collapse to your knees in the soft dirt and bow your head until your forehead touches the ground. You pray aloud, tears of physical pain and spiritual devotion streaming down your face, begging for divine mercy and the strength to protect your people from destruction. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail regarding this pivotal moment was recorded by contemporary chroniclers. As you rose from the ground, your face pale and marked with damp soil, a sudden wave of emotional energy surged through the gathered knights. Men who had been quietly preparing for their own deaths moments earlier broke into loud, tearful acclamations, drawing their broadswords and shouting their battle cries into the wind. The sight of their 16-year-old king, visibly broken by disease, yet prostrating himself in the dust before the cross, transformed a desperate military gamble into an unstoppable, almost ecstatic surge of martial devotion. With the assistance of 2 squires, you climb back into your high wooden saddle, locking your thighs firmly against the padded leather bolsters. You draw your sword with your left hand, the cold steel flashing under the morning sun. There are no lengthy speeches or complicated tactical maneuvers left to discuss. You turn your horse toward the valley, lower your visor, and give the signal. The trumpets sound a single, piercing blast that echoes off the limestone cliffs, and the entire Frankish vanguard surges forward down the slope. To describe the impact of 400 fully armored knights galloping downhill in tight formation is to describe a localized earthquake. The thundering thud of 1,600 iron-shod hooves shakes the hillside, creating a rhythmic, terrifying rumble that drowns out the wind. Clad in heavy chainmail, white surcoats, and iron helmets, the knights hit the scattered Ayyubid lines like a massive iron ram driven into brittle timber. The initial shockwave shatters the vanguard of Saladin's army instantly, flattening supply tents, splintering baggage carts, and sweeping aside light infantry before they can even reach for their weapons. Saladin, realizing the magnitude of the disaster unfolding around him, desperately attempts to rally his elite personal guard, 1,000 disciplined Mamluk horsemen dressed in distinctive yellow silk coats over heavy mail. These veteran warriors form a hasty defensive ring around their master's command tent, attempting to hold off the Frankish heavy cavalry with dense volleys of arrows and spear thrusts. But the momentum of your charge, fueled by the fanatic resolve of the Knights Templar riding beneath the black and white banner of the Beauseant, proves completely unstoppable. The Templars, acting as the tip of your steel spear, smash directly into the Mamluk center with crushing force. Historians still argue whether Saladin came within inches of being captured or killed during those desperate, chaotic minutes in the center of his camp. Some medieval chroniclers claim that Frankish knights actually reached the guy ropes of Saladin's personal pavilion, slaying his personal bodyguards before the Sultan managed to slip out through the rear flaps. Other scholars contend that Saladin's personal guard deliberately sacrificed their lives to buy their leader just enough time to reach a fast, unarmored racing camel. Regardless of the precise physical distance between you and your rival, one fact remains unquestioned. Saladin was forced to flee the field in total panic, riding a single camel through the mud, while leaving behind his weapons, his royal tent, and his personal baggage train. Now, let's be entirely honest for a moment. If someone had told Saladin that morning that his massive, invincible invasion army was about to be utterly dismantled by a 16-year-old boy who couldn't use his right hand and 80 Templars who probably hadn't slept in 2 days, he would have laughed them all the way back to Cairo. Yet there he was, executing a very un-Sultan-like sprint across the desert on a camel, while his scattered troops sprinted in every imaginable direction. It turns out that supreme overconfidence is indeed the most efficient way to convert an effortless victory into a complete historic disaster. As the enemy formation shatters into complete rout, the battle transforms into a relentless, miles-long pursuit across the coastal plains toward Ramla and the Sinai Desert. Your infantry and light cavalry pursue the fleeing remnants of the Ayyubid host, preventing them from reforming or mounting any organized counterattack. The ground is littered with discarded armor, fallen banners, and thousands of abandoned pack animals carrying gold, silk, and military supplies meant for the conquest of Jerusalem. Throughout the long afternoon, you remain on horseback, overseeing the consolidation of the field and ensuring that your men maintain operational discipline despite their sheer exhaustion. The air is thick with the sharp tang of sweat, iron, horse lather, and the sweet, heavy scent of victory. Your body aches in ways you didn't know were physically possible. Every muscle in your back and thighs burns from the immense physical effort of guiding your warhorse without the aid of your right arm. Yet, as you look out over the sun-drenched plain of Montgisard, watching the gold reliquary of the True Cross glinting in the late afternoon light, a deep, dark depth of strength demonstrates. One set down, profound calm washes over you. By the time the sun begins to dip below the western horizon, painting the Mediterranean sky in brilliant streaks of plum, copper, and gold, the Battle of Montgisard is over. A small crusader force has achieved one of the most miraculous, improbable victories in medieval military history, completely destroying an invading army and securing the immediate survival of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Leaning heavily on the shoulder of a loyal squire as you walk toward a simple wooden stool set up near the captured royal pavilion. You sit quietly in the dimming light, listening to the soft murmur of victorious soldiers and the gentle rustle of evening leaves, knowing that against all human expectation, you have saved your realm. As the winter of 1177 settles over the Judean hills, the news of your staggering triumph at Montgisard sweeps through the narrow stone streets of Jerusalem like a warm, invigorating light. The Holy City, which had been bracing for a terrifying siege just weeks earlier, erupts into ecstatic celebration. When your royal procession approaches the iconic David Gate, the heavy iron-studded doors swing wide, and thousands of joyful citizens spill out into the chill morning air to greet you. Church bells peal merrily across the rooftops, their deep bronze notes echoing off the ancient limestone walls, while priests burn fragrant frankincense along the roadside, and townspeople strew palm fronds and embroidered tapestries beneath your warhorse's hooves. Beside you, the golden reliquary of the True Cross glints under the pale winter sun, returning home to its sacred shrine. You sit upright in your high wooden saddle, clad in a dark velvet cloak lined with fur to ward off the biting wind, nodding politely to the cheering crowds. To the people of Outremer, you are no longer merely their teenage monarch. You are the living miracle of Christendom, the fearless Leper King who shattered an empire's army against all human probability. Yet behind the public spectacle and triumphant fanfare lies a dark, unavoidable reality. Victory in the field has exacted a brutal physical toll on your frail body. Once the heavy oak doors of the royal palace close behind you, isolating you from the roar of the crowds, the artificial strength fueled by adrenaline and sheer willpower evaporates completely. You collapse into the arms of your loyal attendants, unable to walk unassisted to your private chambers. The extreme physical exertion of the campaign, riding for days through torrential autumn rains, locked inside heavy iron mail and commanding a desperate cavalry charge, has dramatically accelerated the progression of your disease. In the quiet warmth of your bedchamber, where a bronze brazier glows with red-hot olive wood embers, a team of royal physicians gently unlaces your riding boots and peels back the damp linen bandages wrapped around your limbs. The sharp medicinal scent of myrrh, crushed aloe, and rosewater salves fills the dim room, mingling with the bitter aroma of herbal teas brewing over small charcoal stoves. Let's be completely honest for a moment. While the great barons of the realm were busy raising their heavy silver goblets in the grand banqueting hall, downing vintage Syrian wine, and giving boastful speeches about how they single-handedly routed the Sultan, you were lying in bed feeling like you had been repeatedly trampled by a herd of angry pack mules. It is one of the classic ironies of medieval royal life. The guys who spent the entire battle nervously looking for the nearest exit are always the first ones to demand a second round of dessert at the victory feast. You listen to the distant sounds of laughter and music echoing down the stone corridors, smiling weakly into the shadows. Winning a battle as glorious as it sounds in the songs of traveling minstrels does not magically fix a kingdom's structural problems. It is much like patching a single leak in a crumbling stone dam during a massive rainstorm. It buys you precious time, certainly, but the river is still rising, and the dam is not getting any younger. In the quiet weeks following the campaign, your physicians turn to an array of specialized treatments in a desperate attempt to soothe your inflamed nerves and restore vitality to your limbs. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail of medieval Levantine medicine was the frequent use of theriac, a famous, highly prized medical concoction originating from ancient Roman times, made by blending crushed pearls, rare spices, dried viper flesh, and concentrated botanical extracts in honey. Physicians believed that this complex potion possessed unique properties capable of neutralizing internal toxins and halting the spread of nerve degeneration. You swallow the thick, bitter paste daily, enduring its strange metallic aftertaste without complaint. At the same time, native Syrian healers apply warm sulfur compresses and soothing oil baths to your legs, attempting to ease the deep throbbing aches in your joints. Despite their best efforts, the physical decay continues its relentless march. You begin to notice subtle changes in your facial nerves, a faint stiffness around your eyes and mouth, signaling that the illness is no longer confined to your arms and legs. While you recover in Jerusalem, dispatches arriving from the south paint a vivid picture of the chaotic aftermath across the border. Saladin's retreat through the Sinai desert had been an absolute nightmare of starvation, thirst, and harassment by hostile Bedouin tribes. A well-established historical fact of this post-Montgisard period is that Saladin faced widespread rumors of his own death upon his return to Cairo, triggering immediate political instability and minor rebellions among rival factions who assumed his empire was about to collapse. Saladin was forced to act with swift, unyielding severity to reassert his authority, crushing dissenters and executing ringleaders before turning his full attention back to military reorganization. The crushing defeat at Montgisard fundamentally reshaped Saladin's perception of you. He realized that as long as you sat on the throne of Jerusalem, the Latin kingdom could not be swept away by a single swift invasion. He abandoned his hopes of an easy, decisive victory, resolving instead to adopt a patient, long-term war of attrition, designed to grind down your kingdom's limited resources. Historians still argue whether the immediate months following Montgisard represented a tragic missed opportunity for the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Some scholars contend that if the main Crusader army returning from the northern siege of Harim had immediately joined forces with your victorious southern troops, the Franks could have launched a devastating offensive into Syria, taking advantage of Saladin's temporary weakness and political distraction. Other historians argue that such a plan was pure fantasy, pointing out that the Latin kingdom was severely depleted in manpower, its treasury drained by campaign expenses, and its horses exhausted from weeks of forced marches. In their view, your decision to focus on defensive consolidation, repairing damaged border fortresses, and replenishing grain reserves was the only sensible choice for a state operating on such razor-thin margins of survival. As the winter turns to early spring, the eternal question of royal succession returns to dominate the conversations of the court. The kingdom receives a crucial ray of hope from the royal palace at Ascalon. Your elder sister Sibylla gives birth to a healthy baby boy named Baldwin in your honor. Sibylla's husband, William Longsword of Montferrat, had tragically died of a sudden, violent fever earlier in 1177, leaving her a pregnant young widow. The arrival of this healthy infant, the future Baldwin V, provides the kingdom with a direct, legitimate male heir to the throne, temporarily easing the existential dread gripping the nobility. Yet the birth of your nephew also sparks a new round of intense political maneuvering among the court factions. Powerful lords immediately begin calculating who will marry the widowed Sibylla next, recognizing that her future husband will likely hold the regency when the young infant eventually inherits the crown. Sitting in your private study as the cool night air flows through the arched window, you look at the small parchment scroll containing the official announcement of your nephew's birth. The sweet aroma of night-blooming jasmine and damp stone drifts up from the courtyard gardens below, mingling with the faint, comforting scent of burning beeswax candles. You trace the red wax seal with your left thumb, feeling a quiet sense of relief. You have held the line against the greatest military force in the Middle East, proved your ability to rule, and secured a male heir for your dynasty. Your body may be slowly crumbling beneath you, but your spirit remains untouched by despair. As midnight settles over the holy city, you lean back against the soft velvet cushions of your chair, listening to the soft breeze whisper through the stone embrasures, ready to face whatever new trials tomorrow may bring. The rushing waters of the Jordan River carve a vibrant green ribbon through the sun-baked limestone gorges north of the Sea of Galilee. It is the spring of 1179, and the air at the ancient river crossing known as Jacob's Ford is thick with the sharp scent of wet river silt, fresh pine sap, and burning limestone kilns. You stand on the rising earthworks of Chastelet, a massive new stone fortress under construction, listening to the rhythmic, metallic clatter of hundreds of stonemasons' chisels echoing across the valley. Beside you, heavy wooden cranes creak under the weight of ashlar blocks being hoisted onto the curtain wall. For months, you have poured the royal treasury's remaining gold into this project, turning a vulnerable ford along the main trade route into an intimidating bastion of iron and stone. Positioning a major stronghold at Jacob's Ford is a bold, undeniably aggressive strategic statement. Located barely a single day's hard ride from the gates of Damascus, Chastelet effectively places a loaded crossbow directly against Saladin's northern frontier. A well-established historical fact of this campaign is that Saladin recognized the mortal threat this new castle posed to his supply lines and tried desperately to eliminate it before the mortar could dry. He dispatched diplomatic envoys to your camp, offering you a staggering sum of 60,000 gold dinars if you would abandon the project and dismantle the walls. When you flatly rejected the offer, Saladin raised his bribe to an unbelievable 100,000 gold dinars, enough money to fund royal administrative expenses for years. Now, let's pause for a second to appreciate the sheer audacity of that moment. Offering a king a small mountain of gold to stop building a fortress on his own border is certainly one of medieval history's more optimistic real estate negotiation strategies. It is roughly equivalent to a neighbor tossing a bag of cash over your fence and asking nicely if you would mind taking down your front door. But you understood that some strategic locations are priceless. You looked the Ayyubid ambassadors in the eye, declined their bags of gold, and ordered your masons to lay the next course of stones even faster. Managing this ambitious construction project, however, requires every ounce of your dwindling physical energy. The Jordan Rift Valley lies nearly 200 meters below sea level, creating a hot, suffocating microclimate where the air feels heavy and still. For someone suffering from advancing neurological decay, such extreme conditions are punishing. The numbness that began in your right arm years ago has now crept down into your legs, making it increasingly difficult to walk across uneven terrain without leaning heavily on the arm of a loyal squire. Your linen bandages must be changed multiple times a day, as sweat and dust irritate your sensitive skin. Yet you insist on inspecting the works personally, running your left hand over the rough-hewn stone blocks to ensure the walls are built thick enough to withstand heavy siege engines. By early June of 1179, the peaceful hum of construction is shattered by urgent intelligence reports from the north. Saladin, having failed to buy the castle, has launched a massive raiding force into the fertile pastures around Banyas and the Litani River, intent on burning grain fields and provoking an open-field confrontation. You immediately issue orders for the feudal army to muster. Riding out from Jacob's Ford alongside Count Raymond of Tripoli and the formidable Grand Master of the Knights Templar, Odo de Saint-Amand, the march into the high, breezy plateau of Marj Ayoun, the Meadow of Springs, is crisp and clear. On June 10th, your vanguard catches sight of the Ayyubid raiding parties scattered across the valley below, laden with plunder and driving herds of captured livestock. Sensing an easy victory, the Frankish cavalry surges forward, driving the enemy raiders back in confusion. But in the euphoria of the initial pursuit, tactical discipline completely dissolves. The Templars and local barons break formation, riding headlong after the fleeing raiders, without waiting for your main royal infantry to close the gap behind them. Saladin, watching from a nearby ridge with his main tactical reserve, spots the fatal disconnection instantly. He launches a crushing countercharge into the exposed, disorganized Frankish horsemen. What began as a routine skirmish instantly transforms into a chaotic, terrifying trap. Ayyubid cavalry swarms the meadow, cutting off retreat routes and splitting the Crusader forces into isolated pockets. Historians still debate whether the disaster at Marj Ayoun was caused primarily by Grand Master Odo de Saint-Amand's headstrong, reckless charge that shattered the battle line, or if Raymond of Tripoli's overly cautious positioning on the rear flank inadvertently failed to support the vanguard before Saladin's heavy horsemen struck. Some scholars argue that Odo's legendary arrogance led him to ignore standard military doctrine, while others contend that the terrain itself obscured Saladin's main force until it was far too late to reform the lines. Regardless of where the tactical blame lies, the outcome on the field is catastrophic. As the battle line collapses into a panicked rout, you find yourself trapped in the center of a swirling vortex of dust, shouting men, and clashing steel. Because your legs are now too weak to control a horse in the middle of a chaotic melee, you cannot simply leap into the saddle and gallop away like the other horsemen. As enemy riders close in around your small royal retinue, your capture or death seems absolute. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail from this desperate retreat reveals how close the Kingdom of Jerusalem came to losing its monarch that afternoon. Seeing that you were physically unable to ride through the rugged mountain terrain, a massive, muscular French knight named Galerin of Chartres rode up beside you. Without hesitation, Galerin dismounted, lifted your frail body onto his own broad shoulders, and carried you on his back down steep, treacherous rocky paths, while iron arrows rained down around you. Step by agonizing step, Galerin hauled his royal burden down the ravine until he reached the safety of the nearby fortress of Beaufort, saving your life through sheer physical endurance. Safe behind the stone walls of Beaufort, you absorb the bitter, crushing reality of the defeat. The battle has claimed many of your most valuable commanders. Grand Master Odo de Saint-Amand has been captured and dragged away in chains to Damascus, where he will eventually die in captivity after refusing to be ransomed. Hugh of Tiberias, Raymond of Tripoli's stepson, lies in an enemy prison, along with dozens of veteran knights whose experience cannot be easily replaced. To make matters worse, 2 months later, in August 1179, Saladin brings his full army to Jacob's Ford. After a brief, intense siege, Ayyubid sappers dig beneath the wooden foundations of Chastelaye, fill the tunnels with dry wood and pig fat, and set them ablaze. The massive stone walls collapse into dust, and the unfinished fortress you fought so hard to build is razed to the ground. The dream of securing the Jordan River crossing vanishes in a cloud of black smoke. Returning to Jerusalem in the quiet autumn of 1179, you sit alone in your private chambers, as twilight casts long indigo shadows across the stone floor. The cool mountain breeze carries the soothing scents of night-blooming jasmine, damp earth, and dried lavender from the palace courtyard. You lean back against the velvet cushions, feeling a deep, quiet throb in your weary limbs. Marj Ayyun and the loss of Chastelaye have taught you a brutal, unforgettable lesson. Victory is never permanent, and against an enemy as patient as Saladin, a single moment of rash impatience can undo years of careful preparation. Yet as you look out at the quiet bell towers of the holy city under the evening stars, your resolve remains unbroken. You have survived the battle, survived the retreat, and lived to protect your realm for another day. Spring of 1180 brings a soft, deceptive sweetness to the Judean hills. Almond trees across the valley burst into delicate white and pale pink blossoms, casting a subtle honeyed fragrance through the open stone arcades of the royal palace. Below in the courtyards, orange trees blossom in quiet terraced gardens, where fountains trickle rhythmically against smooth marble basins. Yet inside the council halls, the atmosphere is anything but serene. The military setback at Marj Ayyun and the heartbreaking destruction of the fortress at Jacob's Ford have sent shockwaves through the political establishment. While you quietly manage the relentless progression of your physical fatigue, a different kind of war erupts right under your roof. One fought not with heavy steel lances or siege engines, but with veiled threats, secret matrimonial pacts, and fierce court rivalries. The central prize in this high-stakes political chess game is your widowed elder sister Sibylla. Ever since her first husband, William of Montferrat, passed away 3 years earlier, her hand in marriage has represented the ultimate key to royal power. Whoever marries Sibylla will not only gain vast feudal estates, but will almost certainly assume the regency over her infant son, young Baldwin, and eventually inherit the crown when your own reign reaches its inevitable conclusion. For months, 2 powerful competing factions inside your court have been maneuvering to claim her. On one side stand the native barons of the realm, led by Count Raymond of Tripoli and Lord Bohemond III of Antioch, who advocate for a local nobleman, specifically Baldwin of Ibelin. On the other side sits your mother, Agnes of Courtenay, along with your uncle Jocelyn, who are deeply suspicious of Raymond's long-term ambitions and determined to keep royal authority centered around your immediate family line. In April 1180, during the sacred solemnity of Holy Week, this political rivalry escalates into a near coup. Raymond of Tripoli and Bohemond of Antioch assemble an armed retinue and march unannounced toward Jerusalem, entering the kingdom's borders under the pretext of attending Easter pilgrimages. Their true objective, however, is glaringly obvious. They intend to force your hand, pressure the royal council, and marry Sibylla to Baldwin of Ibelin before any opposition can be organized. News of their unexpected advance reaches the capital like a sudden thunderclap. The palace corridors buzz with frantic murmurs as courtiers gather in anxious clusters beneath the high stone vaults, their shadows flickering against walls lit by beeswax candles. Rather than allowing your authority to be dictated by an armed coalition of barons, you and your mother execute a lightning-fast countermaneuver that catches the entire court completely off guard. You authorize the immediate, rushed marriage of Sibylla to a newly arrived French knight named Guy of Lusignan. Guy is a tall, remarkably handsome nobleman from the Poitou region of western France, who recently landed in the Levant alongside his ambitious older brother, Amalric. Guy's unexpected promotion from an unlanded foreign adventurer to the most powerful noble in the kingdom leaves the native barons utterly speechless. To be completely honest, watching the seasoned, stern barons of Jerusalem react to Guy of Lusignan's sudden arrival is like watching a group of grizzled chess grandmasters get outmaneuvered by someone who just walked into the room because he looked good in a velvet cloak. Guy possesses the kind of flawless, chivalric appearance that looks as though it was tailor-made for a romantic ballad sung by a wandering troubadour. Unfortunately, as the court would soon discover, his administrative talent and military instincts fall somewhat short of his impressive physical stature. He is, in essence, the 12th century equivalent of an impressive-looking ornamental vase, striking to display in a reception hall, but utterly useless when you actually need to hold up a collapsing roof. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail regarding Guy's background reveals that his departure from Europe was hardly a peaceful, voluntary pilgrimage. Back in 1168, while living in Aquitaine, Guy and his brothers had staged a treacherous ambush against Patrick of Salisbury, the first Earl of Salisbury, killing the famous English commander while he was escorting Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine. This violent act infuriated King Henry II of England, who promptly confiscated Guy's family lands and exiled him from Poitou. Guy's arrival in the Holy Land was less about seeking spiritual salvation and far more about escaping the wrath of the English crown while searching for a fresh fortune abroad. A well-established historical fact of this tumultuous period is that upon Guy's marriage to Sibylla at Easter in 1180, you officially invested him with the wealthy county of Jaffa and Ascalon, elevating him overnight into the ranks of the high nobility. By granting him these crucial southern territories, which guarded the main coastal routes toward Egypt, you established a powerful royal stronghold, directly blocking Raymond of Tripoli's faction from expanding its influence. Shortly thereafter, to secure a much-needed breathing room for your kingdom's exhausted economy, you negotiated a 2-year land truce with Saladin, temporarily halting border hostilities along the Jordan River. Historians still debate the true underlying motivation behind your decision to sanction Sibylla's sudden marriage to Guy of Lusignan. Some scholars argue that you were acting with remarkable long-term foresight, hoping that marrying a vassal of the House of Anjou would encourage King Henry II of England, who was Guy's liege lord, to fulfill his solemn crusading vows, send massive financial aid, or even travel east to lead an army in person. Other researchers contend that you were physically exhausted and under immense pressure from your mother Agnes, who cleverly exploited Raymond's sudden Easter march to panic the royal council into accepting a foreign match before the native barons could consolidate their grip on the throne. Whatever the precise balance of motives, the immediate political fallout inside your court is disastrous. The native lords, particularly the proud Ibelin family, feel deeply insulted and marginalized by the sudden elevation of an arrogant foreign exile. Raymond of Tripoli retreats to his northern estates in a quiet, dangerous fury, while the kingdom's political unity fractures into bitter, irreconcilable camps. Sitting on your carved throne in the quiet council chamber, after the formal wedding banquets have finally concluded, you look out through the high lancet windows at the peaceful gardens below. The sweet scent of blooming jasmine drifts through the air, but inside, the room feels cold and heavy with unspoken resentment. Guy of Lusignan now sits at your right hand during official council meetings, preening in his gold-embroidered robes and offering opinions on military strategy that reveal a profound ignorance of local geography and desert tactics. You watch him closely, your left hand resting heavily on the wooden armrest of your chair, while your numb right hand remains tucked out of sight beneath your silk mantle. You realize that while you have successfully blocked a baronial takeover, you have handed a massive share of power to a man whose ambition vastly exceeds his capability. As night falls over Jerusalem, bathing the stone bell towers in deep shades of violet and indigo, you retreat to your private quarters. The cool evening breeze carries the soothing, distant sounds of the city, settling into sleep. A dog barking in a far courtyard, the soft whisper of olive leaves, and the gentle rustle of linen curtains. Your body aches with a quiet, persistent throbbing, a constant reminder that time is relentlessly slipping away. You have managed to maintain control over your kingdom's political destiny for another season. But you know that the internal divisions created by this marriage will linger long after the almond blossoms have fallen. You close your eyes, leaning back into the darkness, readying yourself for the political storms you know are gathering just beyond the horizon. The summer heat of 1182 descends upon the Jordan Rift Valley like a heavy, suffocating blanket of molten bronze. High above the river, perched on a sweeping basalt crag overlooking the valley floor, stands the imposing fortress of Belvoir Castle. The dry desert wind howling off the eastern plateaus whips through the high stone battlements, carrying the sharp scents of sun-baked volcanic rock, scorched wild thistles, and dry dust. The Jordan River glimmers like a narrow silver ribbon in the distance, cutting through a landscape parched to a crisp yellow by months of relentless sun. The 2-year truce with Saladin has officially expired, and the fragile peace that held the borders quiet has vanished into thin air. Saladin has crossed the Jordan once again, leading a formidable army across the river near Bethsan and pushing into the Jezreel Valley, determined to draw your field army into a battle of annihilation. Perched atop its lonely volcanic spur, Belvoir Castle, known to native chroniclers as Kawkab al-Hawa, or Star of the Winds, serves as the anchor for the kingdom's northern defenses. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail regarding Belvoir Castle is that it represented a revolutionary milestone in medieval military architecture. Built by the Knights Hospitaller just 15 years earlier, it was one of the world's very first true concentric castles, a sophisticated design featuring an inner fortress nested entirely within an independent outer ring of stone ramparts. To make the stronghold even more impregnable, Hospitaller stonemasons had spent years hand-carving a massive, 20-meter-wide moat directly out of the solid black basalt bedrock, creating a dark, jagged chasm that no siege tower or battering ram could easily cross. Standing on the high ramparts of Belvoir, however, your view of this masterpiece of military engineering is increasingly shadowed. By the summer of 1182, you are 21 years old, and the physical ravages of your illness have reached a harrowing, critical stage. The numbness has spread deep into your limbs, leaving your feet partially paralyzed and your hands severely clawed. Ulcers cover your skin beneath your linen wrappings, and fever frequently burns through your slender frame. Furthermore, your eyesight has begun to cloud, with early symptoms of leprosy-induced blindness, turning the bright Mediterranean landscape into a soft, hazy blur of light and shadow. Yet when dispatches arrive in Jerusalem, warning that Saladin is burning villages in Galilee, you flatly refuse to remain behind the safe stone walls of the capital. The idea of a 21-year-old monarch who can barely see or walk, insisting on riding out to command an army in 100-degree desert heat, sounds like the premise of an exceptionally intense medieval action movie. Most modern 21-year-olds complain if the air conditioning in their apartment drops by 2 degrees, or if their favorite coffee shop runs out of oat milk. Meanwhile, you are having your squires strap you into a heavy wooden war saddle, wrapping your blistered arms in fresh bandages, and preparing to play a high-stakes tactical game of chess against the most brilliant military mind in the Middle East. It is a level of sheer, stubborn determination that leaves even your most cynical barons in absolute awe. You ride out to intercept Saladin at the head of the royal army, accompanied by your main commanders, including Raymond of Tripoli and your new brother-in-law, Guy of Lusignan. As your forces gather on the high plateau near Belvoir Castle at a site known as Leper, you deploy your troops into a tight, highly disciplined tactical formation known as the Mobile Square. A well-established historical fact of the Battle of Belvoir Castle in 1182 is that your army maintained absolute unbreakable defensive discipline throughout the confrontation, forming a dense wall of iron mail, heavy wooden shields, and bristling spears that completely neutralized Saladin's tactical maneuvers. Picture the intense, nerve-wracking atmosphere on the plateau of Leper as the mid-afternoon sun beats down mercilessly in both armies. The air is thick with the suffocating smell of horse sweat, hot iron mail, leather grease, and kicking dust. Saladin's horse archers wheel back and forth across the dry grass, raining clouds of black-shafted arrows onto your lines, hoping to provoke your hot-headed knights into breaking ranks and launching an undisciplined charge. Waves of Ayyubid light cavalry surge forward with piercing war cries, feigning retreats to lure your infantry out of position. But you ride slowly along the inner perimeter of your square, supported by 2 loyal squires, your voice calm and steady as you issue strict orders through your officers. Not a single knight breaks rank, not a single foot soldier steps out of the shield wall. For hours under the scorching sun, the 2 armies engage in a grueling, static war of nerves. Your crossbowmen, crouched behind the tall wooden pavises held by the front-line infantry, respond to every enemy arrow volley with deadly, armor-piercing precision. Whenever Ayyubid cavalry attempts to close the distance, they are met by an impenetrable hedge of long iron spears. Despite suffering from intense heat exhaustion and burning thirst, your men hold their ground with grim, mechanical perfection. They look toward their king, a young man clearly suffering from immense physical pain, holding himself upright in the saddle through pure force of will, and find the courage to stand firm against the overwhelming numbers surrounding them. Historians still debate whether Saladin's decision to disengage at Belvoir Castle was a genuine tactical defeat forced by your impenetrable defensive lines, or a strategic withdrawal by the Sultan, who realized he could not break your army without suffering unsustainable casualties before his planned campaign against Aleppo. Some scholars argue that your superior positioning on the high ground near Belvoir left Saladin with no viable tactical options, making a frontal assault suicidal. Other researchers contend that Saladin never intended to fight a decisive battle at Leper, using the movement instead to test your army's responsiveness while keeping his elite cavalry intact for future conquests in northern Syria. Regardless of Saladin's precise strategic intentions, as the late afternoon sun begins to sink toward the western horizon, casting long, deep shadows across the basalt hills, the stalemate breaks. Seeing that your army's discipline remains completely unshaken, and noticing that your heavy cavalry is regrouping for a potential counterstrike, Saladin realizes that further attacks are futile. He orders his war drums to sound a general withdrawal, pulling his regiments back down the valley slopes and retreating across the Jordan River toward Damascus. Once again, against immense physical and numerical odds, you have successfully defended your kingdom's territorial integrity and repelled a major imperial invasion. As twilight paints the sky over Belvoir Castle in brilliant shades of indigo, rose, and amber, the battlefield quietens into a peaceful, cooling calm. The harsh desert wind softens into a gentle, refreshing breeze blowing off the Sea of Galilee, cooling the hot armor of your tired soldiers. You are helped down from your horse and carried into a simple linen command tent, pitched near the castle's outer walls. Servants bring damp cloths to cool your feverish brow and offer cups of cold spring water from the deep cisterns of Belvoir. You lie back on a low cot, feeling an overwhelming, bone-deep exhaustion settle into every fiber of your body. Your eyesight is failing, and every movement brings a sharp, dull ache. Yet as you listen to the soft, rhythmic murmur of your victorious guards outside, and the distant whistling of the evening wind through the basalt towers of Belvoir, a profound sense of peace fills your heart. You have outmaneuvered the great Sultan once again, proving that a king's true strength lies not in the physical power of his body, but in the unyielding resilience of his spirit. You close your eyes in the dimming light, ready to rest after another hard-fought victory. Late autumn of 1183 brings crisp, biting mountain winds sweeping across the rugged plateau of Ultra-Jourdain, whistling through the deep sandstone gorges surrounding the formidable fortress of Kerak. Inside the towering redstone citadel, however, the chill is driven away by roaring log fires, flickering bronze torches, and the festive warmth of a grand royal celebration. The occasion is the lavish wedding of your 11-year-old half-sister, Princess Isabella, to the young noble Humphrey IV of Touraine. High-vaulted stone halls ring with the melodic strumming of lutes, the cheerful rhythm of tambourines, and the joyful laughter of the kingdom's assembled nobility. The fragrant air is thick with the mouth-watering aromas of whole roasted spiced lamb, sweet date pastries, rare frankincense, and aged Syrian wine flowing freely from silver goblets. For a brief moment, the constant anxiety of border warfare recedes, replaced by the glittering pageantry of medieval courtly life. Yet this festive sanctuary is shattered with brutal suddenness. Saladin, receiving intelligence that the premier lords and military leaders of Outremer are gathered under a single roof, sees a golden strategic opportunity. He swiftly marches a joint Egyptian and Syrian army across the desert, surrounding Kerak in late November 1183 and trapping the wedding party inside. A well-established historical fact of the siege of Kerak is that Saladin brought 9 massive siege engines, giant catapults capable of hurling stone boulders over high curtain walls, and immediately began bombarding the castle's inner courtyards while the wedding feast was still in full swing. What began as a joyous celebration transforms overnight into a nerve-wracking high-stakes siege, with heavy stones crashing into roof tiles and crushing timber arcades. It is during this terrifying bombardment that one of the most famous chivalric exchanges in medieval history takes place. Lady Stephanie of Milly, the formidable mistress of Kerak and mother of the groom, orders her servants to assemble silver platters laden with choice delicacies directly from the wedding banquet, roasted meats, spiced pastries, and fresh fruits. She sends these platters out through the castle gates under a flag of truce to Saladin's command tent. In return for this aristocratic courtesy, Saladin politely thanks Lady Stephanie and inquires which specific tower inside the fortress houses the newlyweds, Isabella and Humphrey. Upon learning its location, Saladin issues strict orders to his 9 siege artillery crews that they are strictly forbidden from targeting that particular tower, allowing the young couple to enjoy their wedding night without iron-bound boulders crashing through their ceiling. Word of Kerak's desperate plight reaches you in Jerusalem via exhausted couriers riding night and day. The political situation in the capital is already deeply volatile. You have recently stripped your brother-in-law, Guy of Lusignan, of his position as regent, deeply disgusted by his passive, indecisive performance during a recent confrontation at Safaria, where he allowed Saladin's forces to raid regional villages without offering battle. But, far more concerning than political infighting is your own physical condition. By late 1183, at 22 years old, your battle against leprosy has reached its heartbreaking final phase. You are now entirely blind, your limbs are paralyzed, and open sores cover much of your skin beneath your linen wraps. You can no longer walk, stand, or hold reins. Now, let's take a quick moment to put this into perspective. In the modern world, most of us will call in sick. wrap ourselves in 3 layers of blankets, and demand endless bowls of chicken soup if we develop a mild head cold or a low-grade fever. Yet here you are, a 22-year-old monarch who is completely blind, bedridden, and unable to move his own legs, hearing that a castle is under siege and casually deciding that the only appropriate response is to build a custom horse litter and lead a relief army into a desert war zone. It is a level of sheer, unyielding stubbornness that defies all medical logic and leaves your doctors shaking their heads in utter disbelief. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail regarding this emergency expedition was the intricate design of the royal litter constructed specifically for your journey. To shield your frail body from the jarring shocks of rough desert roads, royal carpenters built a sturdy, padded wooden frame suspended on long, flexible ashwood poles between 2 exceptionally steady-footed pack mules. The litter was enclosed with heavy silk and linen curtains to shield your hypersensitive skin from the freezing mountain winds and stinging desert dust, effectively creating a mobile royal chamber. Though you cannot see the road or hold a weapon, you insist on being placed inside this litter, riding at the very head of the army alongside Count Raymond of Tripoli. The relief march to Kerak is a grueling physical ordeal that tests the limits of your remaining life force. You lie inside the darkened, swaying enclosure of your litter, listening to the steady, rhythmic thud of thousands of marching boots and the metallic clanking of chainmail coats echoing through the narrow mountain passes. Though your eyes are dark, your other senses are heightened to a razor-sharp degree. You smell the dry, metallic dust kicked up by the vanguard, the sharp scent of leather saddle oil, and the crisp, pine-scented mountain air blowing off the heights of Ultra-Jourdain. Every slight bump in the road sends a dull ache through your joints, yet you maintain a quiet, dignified composure, offering words of encouragement to the officers who ride beside your curtains. The mere knowledge that their young king is present on the field, borne on the stretcher at the front line, spurs your soldiers onward with immense pride and determination. Historians still argue whether Saladin's decision to break the siege upon your army's approach was driven purely by cold tactical calculation or partly by his personal sense of chivalric honor. Some scholars argue that Saladin, ever the master strategist, recognized that staying at Kerak meant risking being trapped in a narrow valley between the castle's garrison and your incoming relief force, leaving his army dangerously exposed to a 2-front attack. Other historians suggest that Saladin, who maintained a profound respect for your courage throughout your reign, felt that engaging a dying, blind king on a stretcher offered no true military glory, preferring instead to preserve his forces for a more decisive opportunity. Whatever the precise balance between military logic and courtly respect, the outcome on the ground is swift and decisive. As scouting reports reach the Ayyubid camp, warning that the royal standard of Jerusalem is entering the valley and that King Baldwin IV is personally present on his litter, Saladin decides not to risk a pitched battle. He orders his engineers to dismantle the 9 siege engines, set fire to their camp structures, and withdraw his regiments back toward Damascus before your forces can close the distance. The siege of Kerak is lifted without a single drop of blood shed on the battlefield. When your horse litter is carried through the massive iron gates of Kerak into the central courtyard, the fortress erupts into a deafening roar of cheers, weeping, and joyful acclamations. Soldiers, townspeople, and wedding guests press forward just to touch the silk curtains of your litter. Lady Stephanie, along with the young newlyweds Isabella and Humphrey, kneels beside your stretcher in deep, tearful gratitude. You lie peacefully on your velvet pillows, your voice faint and raspy, yet filled with quiet authority as you offer blessings and words of comfort to your gathered subjects. You cannot see their faces, but you can feel the warmth of their hands clasping yours and hear the overwhelming relief in their voices. Late that evening, inside a quiet stone chamber high in Kerak Citadel, you rest as the cool desert wind whispers softly through the narrow lancet windows. The faint, sweet aroma of frankincense and festive wine still lingers in the air, mingling with the fresh, clean scent of the mountain night. Your body is utterly spent, every breath a quiet struggle against the dark silence closing in around you. Yet as you lie in the stillness, you feel a deep, profound sense of fulfillment. You have protected your family, saved your realm once again, and proved that even from a stretcher, the spirit of a true sovereign can turn back empires. You close your eyes, listening to the gentle night breeze, ready for deep, well-deserved rest. The winter dampness of early 1184 clings to the high limestone walls of Jerusalem, bringing a cold, persistent drizzle that washes over the cobblestone courtyards. Inside the royal palace, bronze braziers glow softly with dying embers, casting flickers of amber light across the damp flagstones. The room smells pleasantly of cedarwood smoke, dried lavender, and warm woolen blankets. You lie on your raised couch, listening to the steady, rhythmic patter of rain against the glassless lancet windows. The relief of Kerak proved to the world that your mind remains sharp. But the sheer physical exertion of that winter expedition has drained the last reserves of your bodily strength. You can no longer leave your bed without help. Yet from this quiet, candlelit chamber, you are forced to manage the most dangerous political crisis of your entire reign, an open rebellion from within your own family. Guy of Lusignan, nursing his bruised pride after being stripped of the Regency, has retreated to his coastal fiefs of Jaffa and Ascalon. Rather than accepting your royal reprimand with humility, Guy chooses a path of reckless defiance. He begins fortifying his coastal strongholds, withholding feudal revenues from the royal treasury, and ignoring your official summons to appear before the high court in Jerusalem. To maintain order, a king cannot allow a vassal, even a brother-in-law, to treat royal commands as optional invitations. Summoning every ounce of your formidable willpower, you order your attendants to place you back inside your horse litter and carry you across the Judean hills to the gates of Ascalon to confront Guy in person. When your royal procession arrives outside the massive stone walls of Ascalon, an astonishing, unprecedented scene unfolds. The heavy oak gates of the city are barred tight against you. Guy of Lusignan stands high upon the ramparts, looking down at his blind, dying monarch, lying on a stretcher outside his walls, and refuses to open the gates. You order your heralds to ride forward and sound their trumpets, formally demanding entry under the ancient laws of the realm. Inside your litter, you can hear the iron-tipped boots of Guy's guards pacing nervously along the battlements above. Yet the gates remain firmly closed. Guy refuses to come down, hides behind his stone parapets, and sends out word that he will not surrender his lands or appear before your court. Now, let's take a quick moment to appreciate the staggering bravery on display here. A healthy, fully armed nobleman locking his city gates to hide from a blind, paralyzed man carried on a wooden stretcher is certainly one of medieval history's most magnificent profiles in courage. It is the 12th century political equivalent of a teenager locking his bedroom door and turning up his music because his parents asked him to explain why he failed his math test. You can almost picture Guy peeking through an arrow slit, whispering to his guards to pretend nobody is home, hoping that if he stays quiet enough, the King of Jerusalem will simply go away. Faced with such blatant insubordination, you refuse to let Guy's defiance go unanswered. Sitting inside your litter outside the barred gates, you invoke the Assises de Jerusalem, the sacred feudal legal code of the kingdom. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail of this confrontation is that you formally declared Guy's estates forfeit for treason and breach of feudal duty right there beneath his city walls. You then ordered your royal officers to march directly to Guy's urban properties inside Jerusalem, seize his rental properties, and confiscate his local tax revenues for the royal crown. At the same time, you initiate formal legal proceedings through the church to annul Guy's marriage to your sister Sibylla, seeking to strip him of any legitimate claim to the royal lineage. Sibylla, however, remains fiercely devoted to her husband, refusing to return to port and choosing instead to stay locked inside Ascalon by Guy's side. Recognizing that Guy and Sibylla can no longer be trusted with the future of the realm, you take a decisive, radical step to permanently secure the succession. A well-established historical fact of late 1183 is that you officially crowned your 5-year-old nephew, Baldwin of Montferrat, as co-king, known to history as Baldwin V, inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. By elevating the young boy to full royal status during your own lifetime, you effectively bypass Guy of Lusignan entirely, ensuring that if you pass away, the crown will transfer directly to the child rather than falling into Guy's hands. The coronation of young Baldwin V is a poignant, memorable spectacle that lives long in Crusader memory. Because the 5-year-old child is far too small to wear the heavy golden crown or carry the royal scepter, special accommodations must be made during the sacred ceremony. When the procession moved through the crowded streets toward the Holy Sepulchre, Balian of Ibelin, a tall, commanding baron of the realm, steps forward, lifts the young boy onto his broad shoulders, and carries him high above the cheering crowds so that everyone can see their new little monarch. Inside the basilica, under the golden dome, the heavy royal crown is held carefully over the child's head, while prayers are chanted in Latin. You lie on a raised couch near the altar, unable to see the ceremony with your clouded eyes, but listening intently to the joyful shouting of your people as the child is proclaimed co-ruler of Jerusalem. To protect the young child's reign from future political interference, you make another crucial appointment. You designate Count Raymond of Tripoli as the official regent and guardian of Baldwin V. Historians still debate whether Raymond's acceptance of the regency was a selfless act of patriotic duty designed to stabilize a fragile state, or a calculated, long-term political maneuver aimed at positioning his own family line to assume power if the sickly young child did not survive to adulthood. Some scholars point out that Raymond demanded control of the strategic fortress of Beirut as payment for taking the regency, suggesting a pragmatic concern for his own power base. Other historians emphasize that Raymond was the most experienced statesman in the kingdom, making him the only logical choice to guide the young boy through the dangerous waters ahead. With the internal succession legally secured, you turn your attention towards securing external help for your struggling kingdom. In the summer of 1184, you authorize a grand diplomatic embassy to Western Europe, dispatching Patriarch Heraclius of Jerusalem alongside the Grand Masters of the Knights Templar and Knights Hospitaller. They carry with them an extraordinary symbolic offering, the golden keys to the city of Jerusalem, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the Tower of David. Their mission is to travel to the royal courts of Paris, London, and Rome, offering these sacred keys to King Philip II of France or King Henry II of England in exchange for a major European crusade to reinforce the Latin East. As the diplomats sail out from the harbor of Acre, leaving white foam trails against the blue waters of the Mediterranean, a quiet hush settles over the royal court in Jerusalem. You have built a fortress of legal decrees, appointed a regent, crowned a successor, and sent a cry for help across the sea. You lie in your quiet bedchamber as the afternoon sun casts long amber beams across the stone floor, smelling the faint, soothing scent of burning frankincense and dried rose petals. Your body is fading, your breath is shallow, but your mind is at peace. You have done everything within human power to protect your people and preserve the crown. Late that evening, a gentle breeze rustles the linen curtains of your chamber, carrying the cool night air off the Judean hills. You lie back against your soft velvet pillows, listening to the quiet, rhythmic breathing of your loyal attendants sitting nearby. The city of Jerusalem sleeps peacefully beneath a blanket of stars, its bell towers standing silent in the dark. You close your eyes, feeling a profound sense of calm wash over you, knowing that whatever time remains to you, you have kept your sacred trust to the very end. Early spring of 1185 arrives softly over Jerusalem, bringing lukewarm breezes that whisper through the high arched embrasures of the royal apartments. The sharp chill of winter has faded, replaced by the gentle scent of almond blossoms, wild chamomile, and damp garden earth drifting up from the lower terraces. Inside your private bedchamber, the world has shrunk to a quiet, dimly lit sanctuary of soft textiles and flickering lamplight. Bronze oil lamps cast a warm, honey-colored glow across heavy wool tapestries, while the subtle aroma of burning sandalwood and dried mint sabs floats in the still air. You lie upon a low, feather-padded couch, draped in crisp white linen sheets that feel soothing against your sensitive skin. Outside, the distant, rhythmic cooing of rock doves roosting along the limestone parapets provides a peaceful, unbroken backdrop to the quiet room. Your physical journey has reached its quiet culmination. Complete blindness has enveloped your sight in a soft, impenetrable twilight, and your limbs rest motionless beside you, paralyzed by the final stages of the illness. You can no longer turn your head or sit upright without assistance, and your voice has softened to a raspy, quiet whisper. Yet inside this silent, motionless vessel, your mind remains remarkably clear, bright, and completely undisturbed by panic. While your physical sight has vanished, your internal map of the kingdom is as vivid as ever. You can mentally trace every road from Acre to Ascalon, picture the exact elevation of the Golan Heights, and remember the name of every baron, bishop, and garrison captain who serves under your banner. Unable to hold a pen or sit at a council table, you transform your private bedchamber into the executive hub of the entire realm. Scribes sit quietly on low wooden stools beside your couch, their reed pens scratching softly against fresh sheets of parchment as they write down your final administrative commands. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail of these final months concerns the mechanical process of authenticating royal decrees when you could no longer move your hands. When a royal charter required your official approval, the Chancellor of Jerusalem would gently take your unresponsive right hand, slide the heavy silver signet ring onto your thumb, and guide your hand downward to press the royal matrix into a pool of warm, vermilion wax. Even in total paralysis, the legal authority of the Latin kingdom still passed directly through your fingers. Now, let's take a brief moment to admire the sheer, unfiltered awkwardness that defined your daily court receptions during these final weeks. Courtiers and foreign envoys would shuffle into your chamber, stand near the heavy curtained doorways, and attempt to whisper secret political gossip in hushed tones, foolishly assuming that because your eyes were dark, your ears had suddenly become decorative wall ornaments. It turns out that losing your eyesight actually sharpens your hearing to an almost terrifying degree. You would lie perfectly still on your cushions, listen to two ambitious noblemen quietly plotting who should get which tax assessment in Galilee, and then softly interrupt their conversation from across the room by offering a very specific, highly accurate correction regarding local grain prices. Watching two full-grown medieval lords jump 3 feet into the air because a bedridden king overheard their secret conversation must have provided a very satisfying moment of dark humor amidst an otherwise somber atmosphere. In these final, quiet sessions with your council, you focus entirely on building a legal shield around your young successor to prevent the kingdom from tearing itself apart after your death. A well-established historical fact of this closing phase of your reign is the enactment of an extraordinary succession decree designed to permanently neutralize the ambitions of Guy of Lusignan. You confirmed Raymond III of Tripoli as regent for your 5-year-old nephew, Baldwin V, and explicitly ruled that if the child king should die before reaching adulthood, the crown of Jerusalem would not automatically fall to Sibylla or Guy. Instead, the right to determine the legitimate sovereign between Sibylla and her younger sister Isabella would be submitted to an international arbitration tribunal, consisting of the four greatest rulers of Western Christendom: Pope Lucius III, Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, King Philip II of France, and King Henry II of England. It was a masterclass in legal diplomacy, erecting an international barrier that no ambitious local lord could easily break. Historians continue to debate the precise date of your passing, as medieval chroniclers recorded conflicting timelines for the end of your reign. Some prominent scholars, relying on Arabic histories written by Ibn al-Athir and regional Syriac records, place your death in mid-March 1185, arguing that official royal charters ceased bearing your personal name around that time. Other historians, analyzing Latin documents from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the writings of William of Tyre's continuators, contend that you survived through the late spring, passing away in mid-May 1185, just as the summer heat began to return to the Judean hills. This lingering chronological debate highlights how, even in his final hours, the exact boundary between the living king and his enduring royal decrees remained blurred in the eyes of his contemporaries. Throughout these long, motionless weeks, your daily care is overseen by devoted attendants and members of the Order of St. Lazarus, a unique military and religious order founded specifically to care for lepers, and led by knights who suffered from the disease themselves. These men understand your physical suffering on a deeply personal level, tending to your wounds with exceptional gentleness and quiet dignity. The room is kept constantly fresh, with cool water basins infused with rose petals and crushed bay leaves, while soft linen curtains block out the bright glare of the midday sun. There are no frantic arguments or dramatic outbursts in your presence. The atmosphere is governed by a profound, respectful calm, as though the entire court recognizes that they are witnessing the final, majestic chapter of a legendary life. As the afternoon shadows lengthen across the stone floor, painting the chamber in soft tones of violet and deep gold, a tranquil silence settles over the palace. You listen to the gentle, rhythmic rustle of the linen curtains as the evening breeze sweeps in from the Mediterranean, carrying the faint, clean scent of olive groves and sea salt. The heavy burdens of state, the endless battles, the court rivalries, the logistical headaches, and the constant threat of invasion begin to feel light and distant. You have fought every battle required of you, defended your realm against overwhelming odds, and secured the legal future of your people with unwavering integrity. Your body is resting, your mind is serene, and your work is complete. Late into the night, the soft flickering of the bronze oil lamp casts long, gentle shadows against the limestone walls, fading slowly into a soft, comforting dimness. You lie quietly against your plush velvet pillows, surrounded by the peaceful hush of the holy city sleeping beneath the stars. The steady, slow rhythm of your breathing merges with the quiet whisper of the night wind, carrying you gently toward an eternal, undisturbed peace. You rest in the stillness of your chamber, fully prepared for the final transition into memory and legend. In the quiet darkness of a spring night in 1185, as the soft scent of blooming olive trees and cool mountain air drifts through the open lancet windows of the royal palace, your long, arduous journey finally comes to a peaceful end. The constant throbbing pain that accompanied your waking hours fades into absolute silence, and the heavy burden of the golden crown slips away forever. At 24 years old, having governed the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem for 11 harrowing, improbable years, you surrender your spirit to the quiet stillness of eternity. The news of your passing ripples through the sleeping city in hushed, sorrowful whispers, moving from the palace corridors down to the humble stone homes of the artisans, merchants, and soldiers who had looked to their young, afflicted monarch as an unyielding beacon of hope. A solemn funeral procession winds its way through the narrow cobblestone streets of the Holy City. Thousands of grief-stricken citizens, dressed in dark mourning robes, line the rooftops and thoroughfares to pay their final respects to the king who gave his youth and body to protect them. Priests swing silver censers, filling the crisp morning air with thick clouds of sweet frankincense and myrrh, while the deep, resonant notes of church bells echo off the ancient limestone ramparts. You are carried into the sacred gloom of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and laid to rest in a grand marble tomb positioned directly beneath Mount Calvary, resting alongside your father, King Amalric I, and the heroic Crusader monarchs who built the realm before you. An unusual and lesser-known historical detail regarding the royal tombs of Jerusalem is that your marble sarcophagus remained undisturbed inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre for more than 600 years. While empires rose and fell across the Middle East, pilgrims from across the globe continued to visit the sacred chapel where the Leper King was buried. It was not the chaos of medieval warfare that ultimately destroyed these historic royal monuments, but a catastrophic fire that engulfed the rotunda of the Holy Sepulchre in October 1808, causing the heavy stone dome to collapse and shattering the medieval tombs of the Crusader kings into dust. A well-established historical fact of your remarkable 11-year reign is that despite ascending the throne as an afflicted teenager, despite facing total blindness and paralysis, and despite confronting the vast, unified empire of Saladin, you never surrendered a single major fortress or lost a foot of kingdom territory to your rival. Through strategic brilliance at Montgisard, stubborn defensive discipline at Belvoir Castle, and sheer moral courage at Kerak, you maintained the territorial integrity of Outremer against odds that every contemporary observer considered completely hopeless. You proved to the medieval world that true sovereignty is not measured by physical perfection, but by the strength of an unyielding spirit. Yet the moment your steady hand was removed from the helm of state, the fragile unity you had worked so hard to maintain began to fracture with terrifying speed. Just 1 year after your death, in the summer of 1186, your delicate nephew, the 9-year-old child King Baldwin V, passed away unexpectedly at the port city of Acre. His sudden death triggered an immediate, chaotic struggle for the throne. Your sister Sibylla seized power in Jerusalem, outmaneuvering the baronial opposition by promising to annul her marriage to Guy of Lusignan, only to trick the court by crowning herself first, and then immediately using her royal authority to place the crown upon Guy's head, proclaiming him King of Jerusalem. Now let's be entirely honest for a moment. If medieval history awarded a medal for snatching catastrophic defeat from the jaws of long-term stability, Guy of Lusignan would have won the solid gold trophy in record time. It took you 11 grueling years of sleepless nights, clever diplomacy, and battlefield improvisation to keep Saladin at bay while physically falling apart. It took Guy of Lusignan less than 14 months to march the entire army of the kingdom directly into a waterless desert trap, lose the sacred relic of the true cross, and hand the holy city over on a silver platter. It really makes one appreciate just how much heavy lifting your willpower was doing behind the scenes during your lifetime. In July 1187, at the catastrophic Battle of the Horns of Hattin, Guy of Lusignan ignored every tactical lesson you had taught at Belvoir and Montgisard. He led the feudal army into an arid, sun-baked volcanic plain without a secure water supply, allowing Saladin's forces to surround and annihilate the Crusader host. With the kingdom's military force completely destroyed in a single afternoon, cities and fortresses across the Levant surrendered in rapid succession. In October 1187, barely 2.5 years after your funeral, Saladin marched triumphantly into Jerusalem, bringing an end to 88 years of Frankish rule over the Holy City. Historians continue to debate whether the total collapse of the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1187 was an inevitable geopolitical certainty, a mathematical consequence of a tiny Christian enclave being surrounded by a unified Ayyubid empire, or if your reign proved that the kingdom could have survived indefinitely if it had continued to be guided by wise, cautious leadership. Some scholars contend that the demographic and financial exhaustion of Outremer meant that your brilliant victories at Montgisard and Belvoir merely bought temporary time for a doomed state. Other historians argue that had you lived another decade, or had a capable ruler like Raymond of Tripoli retained the Regency, the disaster at Hattin would have been avoided, allowing the Latin kingdom to maintain its strategic balance until fresh European armies arrived during the Third Crusade. Interestingly, some of the most glowing tributes to your legacy came from the pens of your fiercest enemies. Muslim chroniclers and historians who served in Saladin's court, including Baha ad-Din and Ibn al-Athir, wrote of you with profound respect and admiration. They described you as a formidable, exceptionally courageous adversary whose physical affliction only made his tactical resolve more terrifying. Saladin himself frequently spoke of you not with contempt, but with a quiet, solemn reverence, recognizing that behind your failing body lay the heart of a true warrior king who commanded the absolute loyalty of his people. Looking back across the centuries at your short, luminous life, your story endures not as a tale of tragic defeat, but as one of the most inspiring sagas of human endurance in world history. You were a boy handed a broken body and a doomed kingdom, yet you refused to play the victim or hide behind the velvet curtains of your palace. You rode into battle with one functional arm, stood as a shield for your people, outmaneuvered the greatest sultan of the Orient, and carried the weight of a nation on your shoulders until your very last breath. You showed the world that a life is not defined by the hand you are dealt, but by the dignity, courage, and honor with which you play it. As the warm evening breeze whispers through the quiet, ancient olive trees surrounding Jerusalem, the memory of your heroic reign lingers like a soft, timeless psalm echoing across the Judean hills. You have finished your course, fought the good fight, and earned an eternal rest. The kingdom of stone and dust may have fallen, but the legend of the Leper King, the ruler who stood unbowed while dying, will live forever in the heart of history. Now, as the distant echoes of history gently fade into the quiet night, allow the lingering thoughts of kings, empires, and ancient stone walls to drift slowly away like autumn leaves floating on a calm, silent river. There is nothing left for you to manage tonight, no heavy decisions to weigh, and no burdens to carry. The long journey is complete, and the world outside your window has settled into a peaceful, slumbering hush. Feel the comforting warmth of your bed surrounding you, wrapping you in a quiet sanctuary of absolute rest and safety. With every soft, deep breath you take, let go of any remaining tension in your shoulders, your hands, and your mind. Picture a quiet, starlit evening overlooking the rolling hills of Judea, where a gentle, cool breeze whispers through ancient olive groves, rustling the silver leaves under a vast, indigo sky filled with countless twinkling stars. The air is fresh and sweet, smelling faintly of lavender, wild thyme, and warm earth, cooling as twilight gives way to the deep, unbroken calm of midnight. Listen to the soft, rhythmic hum of the night around you, carrying you deeper and deeper into a state of serene relaxation. The glowing stars above shine down with a warm, protective light, reminding you that you are safe, peaceful, and entirely free to rest. Let your eyelids grow heavy and soft, drifting effortlessly into the quiet darkness where dreams are gentle and undisturbed. Surrender to the restful tide of sleep, trusting that tomorrow will take care of itself, while tonight belongs entirely to rest, stillness, and peace. Sweet dreams.